Hello and welcome to the Real Podcast Talk. My name is Danniel Williams, and with me is Jeff Packard. How you doing today,
Hello,
Jeff?
hello.
Hey,
How's it
hey.
going?
Great, great. How
Podcast.
are you today?
Good.
Good. So let's talk a little bit just before we get into anything. How was your week?
Well, it's only Wednesday, Daniel.
Well,
So,
last week. How was last week and the rest of this week?
um, no, I mean it's been good. I've been working hard and trying to work smart. So, getting some things going on and um, trying to. I've got a cool little system going on right now with my social media, and not today, but maybe we can talk about that sometime. But I think it's all AI driven. It's pretty awesome. It's actually it's doing a lot. It's instead of me trying to create the content, and I can basically push it out to um, link all the social media channels, and it puts all the hashtags, which is a pain in the ass.
Wow. Yeah.
So, um, and just trying to get that, just keep on doing it consistently and kind of go from there. But it's not about me today. It's about you, my friend. So,
Oh Lord. Okay.
yeah.
What about me today?
Well, I mean, let's talk about your experience. I mean, we met when you were promoting Tom Hopkins, and then Tom, basically did away with a lot of his one-day seminars, and you were like, okay, now what? And you had to start maybe doing your own or promoting someone else, and you started doing your own seminars.
Hmm.
Um, and tell me about that experience first, and then we'll talk about your world travels.
Okay. Well, during my time as a promoter, Tom, when we met, Tom was doing a lot of one day seminars, and then he kind of went a different direction and said he wasn't going to do a whole lot of those anymore. So I was at a crossroad with business to either promote a Tony Robbins, a few Tony Robbins events more, or more Brian Tracy events, or an Omar Perriou, or other speakers, or do my own. So I
Mhm.
kind of just decided to say, hey, let me do my own. And that's what I did. I started promoting myself.
Cool. I mean, no other better way. I mean, if you're gonna, you know, I mean, why not promote yourself if you have something good to say? So
Definitely.
obviously you thought you had something good to say. So, what was your training on? What did you speak on?
In the beginning, my training was a lot of sales and motivation and networking, how you network and how you prospect. And maybe I really tried to focus on somebody that was brand new into the business to keep their energy and their excitement up, but the frustration of overcoming challenges that maybe a veteran like yourself or maybe somebody that's been in the business for 5 or 7 years kind of already mastered that. So, as you know, in any sales business, um, things happen. And if you have the tools to overcome those challenges, it makes life easier. And when you're just starting out, you can read and you can watch people, but for you to actually have to practice those techniques and understand, hey, this book said to do A, B, and C. That's not necessarily true. I got to be able to deliver and do it. So I need help. And I think I really cater to, I would say, people that have in the business for 5 years or less. That was like a little sweet spot for me. And it was fun to do that. It's still fun to do that. It's still fun to take
Hmm.
somebody brand new into the business because you've already seen it, you've already done it, you've been there, and teach them ways that they don't have that frustration anymore. So I enjoy that.
So you like kind of pulling people through the weeds.
A little bit, yeah.
So,
That's a good
mhm,
analogy, yeah.
mhm. So I mean, when I ran into you in Vale, we kind of connected, and um, I said, "What have you been up to? Where have you been?" And you're like, "Well," and then you started name dropping these countries. I'm like, "What?" You like it's been like you're going where? Why? How? What led you there? So, I mean, one of the places that I was running this morning, and I was thinking about the topic of this podcast. Good morning, Vietnam. So, and that's where you went, Vietnam.
Yes.
A lot of people don't go there. So, I mean, they'd go to Vegas or or Anaheim or Fort Worth,
Correct.
So, what led you there? I mean, you're like to just jump on a plane and say, you know what? I'm not training anybody over here in the United States. I'm going over there. So what happened there?
Well, training in the United States kind of took a different turn for me. Was still training in the US, but I wanted something different, something new. So I kind of did a little bit of research and found that Vietnam, the Philippines, different parts of Asia, they're very big in education, and the way that they respect education is different than the way that we look at it here. Most of the parts of Asia, they're salary employees, but education is a priority. But the owners, or we want to call them bosses or owners, they don't think education. They won't pay for education. Let's put it that way. They won't pay for their staff to be educated. They feel their staff should come in educated with the tools and the knowledge to be able to do that job.
So
So there's
that's in another country. That's in other countries. They expect people to kind of do it by themselves. They don't. The company doesn't invest in trainers or coaching or book of the month, whatever.
they don't support that because it's a new, how do I say this? Somebody that's a manager that's in their 50s or 60s, their mentality is not to keep training their people. Their mentality is what education do you have right now and how can you service me as an owner? So their ongoing level of training is different than the approach that we take here. Now, saying that, there is a trend right now for people to become educated, continuing education, continuing training and honing their craft because they don't want to be at that job just getting $200 or $300 a week. In Vietnam, when I was there really promoting heavily, the average income was $300 to $400 a month. Now, if you could take somebody that, and multi-level marketing is huge in those countries, bigger than they are in the US. So if you can take somebody and train them to where they can make $300 to $400 a week, as a coach and as a trainer, you're happy inside because you're actually doing what you love to do and you're seeing results. For the people that you're coaching, you're changing their lives because they could be at their job all month and not make what they make in a week. But they can't do that without the skills. That's where I really have the happiness on the inside and fulfilled when you can help somebody achieve something that maybe they only thought about. And in the US, we take that for granted a lot of times. We say, hey, it's no big deal, blah, blah, blah. We have this money or my boss will do this. And it's a different culture. So how I kind of started was Vietnam and parts of China and the Philippines and Cambodia. They're very big in training as a person, but they didn't have the resources. So I did a little search. I found a person through another person that spoke Vietnamese and English and was Western educated, but living there. And his name was Rob. And I connected with Rob, and he's actually from Canada, but now lives in Vietnam. So I hired him as my translator, interpreter. And he knew the city. He was been in Vietnam for 7 years, spoke the language, and had his own
Wow,
business.
that's
So
crazy.
it is. So there was a lot of things that were different.
What kind of business did he have in Vietnam?
He does the business that he does is oil and gas. So he would connect with people from Alberta, Canada, and parts of Texas that are looking for oil and gas products. And in Vietnam, that's a very big industry. And he would connect whether it's a manufacturing company with a sales rep in Asia and then in the US. And he made it that the oil and gas companies, whether they're in Texas or Canada, didn't have to fly to Asia to meet somebody. He was the go in between guy. And he would make sure whatever parts that companies in the US or Canada would order would be on the boat, and after they paid for it, and he was able to handle all the logistics on that end. So he
Okay.
knew a lot of people, and he knew the system that you had to do.
Hmm.
And him and I connected, and then I just said, "Hey, I'm gonna go to Vietnam." Next thing you know, I bought a ticket and headed out. And I had a plan of what I was going to do before I left, and I kept writing that plan on the plane and said, "I'm going to do A, B, and C day 1, day 2, day 3." And I went to Vietnam, and day 1 was for me. I moved it up 8 hours. I got off the plane, jumped in the cab. Rob and I talked a little bit. I went to the hotel, changed, and I just started prospecting that day. After a 18 and a half hour flight, I just said, boom, I'm going to do it today, right now. So my first prospecting was I walked into a Herbalife office, the largest Herbalife office in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City. And I went and just started talking to somebody and door knocked and got into an office and said, "Hey, my name is Danniel Williams. This is what I do, and I'd love to talk to your agents." And they loved the fact that an American would just come over, not knowing anything, and just train. So I did that.
Wow, that's awesome.
Day 1, I did that on my very first day that I landed. Before I ate or did anything, before I started to seeing the country,
You knocked the door.
I just did it. I mean,
You're like, holy cow, Herbalife. I can train these guys.
because they're multi-level marketing, and I know that they have the same challenges there that people face no matter where they are, whether in the US or Canada. They got to talk to somebody. They got to overcome objections of money, or they don't have time, or is your product going to be right for me? They have those same challenges that we face here in the US.
So it's universal.
It's universal. It's just the techniques that you give them to handle those alter a little bit or different from the US, Canada, or Asia, or South Africa, even. But the premise is the same. And it just happened to be that one of the Herbalife people, agents that I was working with, was also a translator for the UN. And she had an extensive background in sales. And she came up to me and she says, "I've only known you for an hour. I heard your presentation. It was great. But I want to be your translator because some of the things that you're saying I get, but they get lost because the translation from English to Vietnamese is different." So I kind of said, "Well, what's wrong with my translator?" She's like, "He doesn't understand sales. He's telling the words, but he's not selling the words." And I said, "Okay." And her and I talked, and then the next day we got together, had coffee, and she said, "I'm a seller. This is what I do. I sell, and I can train people on what you're saying. So let's work together." And at that point, I did. That next day, the day I landed was Wednesday. That did my first presentation on that Wednesday night. Met with her on Thursday. Saturday, I did 4 more offices that I would have never known about, but she got me into those offices.
Oh, that's great.
So within the first 5 days, I had already sold and booked my first event, which had over 500 people within 4 days.
So where'd you get the, did you already have the venue lined up? Because,
I did not have the venue lined up. What
so
I
you were
had,
selling tickets first.
I was
and
selling
then saying-
tickets, and
and
I
then
said,
trying to
"Listen,
find the venue." Oh, that's
yep, I'm here today. I got to find a venue. You guys understand that it's going to take me a day or two to get a venue." This, I think it was that Monday or Tuesday, 2 or 3 days later, I secured the hotel. Everybody got their tickets, and it was just a great first event. And granted, I was only there 4 days, 5 days at that point. So then I said to myself, what do I do now? Because now the event's huge. And I don't have all the resources in Vietnam as the staff to be able to hand out books and to be able to get people through the door and take the tickets and make sure everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that next week, I was scrambling to find a marketing company that can do tickets and seat people and hold the room and catering and coffees and all of those things. So it took me 4 or 5 days later to be able to secure all that. So within 10 days, I was breathing happily again, if that makes sense. And anybody in business that kind of goes through that, if you sell before you have everything lined up, you kind of go into a scramble mode because you want to produce the best product that you can for your clients. And that's kind of what happened with me the very first time. And I built a relationship with that particular hotel. And from that first event on, that was the only hotel that I used. And it was great. My first event that I had there, it was unbelievable. It led me to other network marketing companies to hire me. I will say that I've met an enormous amount of people that were just grateful for the information, and they'd never seen or heard anything. And one of the other big challenges that I had going to Vietnam, and I don't share this too often, was um, Vietnam is a communistic country.
Hmm.
So you have to understand that you can't talk politics, can't talk about their political parties or yours in the U.S. A lot of people will differ that, and they say, "Oh, you could say anything you want," and so on and so forth. You say that, but you won't do that in an open forum at a coffee shop because you never know who's sitting there. And why would you want to disrespect another country, whether you agree or disagree or whatever the case may be, politically? So one of the things that I had to do was I had to give my workbook up to the government, and they went through and made sure that everything that I was sharing with them had nothing to do with throwing a party, communistic outreach, or any of those things. And for me, I didn't have any issues just handing over my workbook. And in fact, um, my workbook was in dual languages. So it was in one page was Vietnamese, one page was English, so they could follow along at the preference of their speech.
That's pretty cool.
So that was something different than other trainers or other speakers from different parts of the world, whether they're Australian or from the UK, would maybe go to Vietnam and speak at a conference or something, and it was always in their native language. And I think what kind of set me apart from anybody else was my translator was simultaneous with me standing there. It wasn't a box, it wasn't a computer. So when I emphasized the tone or I hesitated my speech, which you have to do in sales, you have to be able to control that. And you have emotions when you sell. She was able to mimic those hesitations and the pauses and the excitement or bringing the tone down or changing the tempo of the speed. She was able to master that with me. And that made it that when you are selling and somebody asks you a question, that you change your tone, you change the language, you change your speed of speech. And she was able to really emphasize that with her people. And it was just cool, if that's the right word to use. It was just cool. And there was a area that the Vietnamese would call a backpack area. And every once in a while I would go down there and just people watch. And it's kind of where all the tourists go. They call it a backpack area. And you have all the Vietnamese culture, but you have all the Western people go there and they get their lunch or they get their sodas or they walk the streets or all of those things. And I was just sitting there. And my friend Rob came up to me and said, "Hey, I know this guy that has a company in the Middle East." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're looking for an American trainer." So I'm like, "Okay, so tell me a little bit more. I'm interested." So I'm sitting in the backpack area, and they call it District 1. So I'm sitting there, and we're drinking coffee. And he arranged a meeting with me, and he said, "Hey, I have somebody in the Middle East that's looking for an American trainer that wants to come over and do this." I was like, "Really?" So we started talking more, and then all of a sudden he picked up the phone and he called his counterpart in the Middle East, and him and I just started talking and talking and talking. Now, granted, I'm in Vietnam and he's in the Middle East, but I'm an American. So we just started talking, and then the next thing you know, we started networking, and then the next thing you know, he's like, "Why don't you come here and do some speeches?" So I said, listen, I got a lot of stuff going on in the US. I have stuff here in Vietnam. I'm expanding. I don't know if I can do all three things at the same time. Because granted, when you're in Vietnam or another country and you still have a business in the US, you depend on the people in the US to really maintain that business for you. You can get your emails and your telephone calls, but you're not there every day babysitting it. And that was one of my biggest fears or challenges, is like, how do I control everything and still make it function and everybody happy and everybody getting the best training. And I said, I don't want to be flying from Asia and going from Phoenix or LA to Asia, getting there on a Wednesday and flying back to the US on a Saturday. I don't want to be doing that. So it was trying to figure everything out, and it worked. And I figured it out. And I had a partner, and we still do business probably every month in the Middle East, where I do training and coaching and live events. So one thing led me to another, that leads me to another. So the moral of this, and even though I love Asia, is you always got to network, and you always have to be open to another opportunity coming to you. And I think a lot of salespeople forget opportunities all the time, or they just don't see them.
Hmm.
Um, and that's important, to keep your eyes open for the opportunities. Some are going to be good opportunities, some are going to be bad opportunities. Um, but I will share that my training and my time that I really spent in Vietnam taught me a lot. It taught me how to do things better in the U.S. And I made great friends. Still talk to people on a weekly basis from there. Still, kind of coach some people and help them when I can. And it's great. I love that time in Vietnam. It was a cool experience.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome experience. What a good a lot of life lessons in there too.
There was one of the biggest life lessons that I took away from there is having a meal with people. There's so much joy for me to be able to go with 20 or 25 people or 30 people, and we all sit at a table and we just talk and having we break bread, as some cultures call it, and you just have a meal. And there's nobody trying to get over on anybody, or somebody that makes more money than somebody else. They don't care about that at the table when you're eating. It's everybody going to talk about all kinds of stuff. And that I really enjoy. And it's cool when you're able to do that. And I think in the US, we do networking dinners, or we sit with people. And I think, in my opinion, a lot of people try to show how much better they are at those dinners. And when you're in a different country, it's not about that. It's about eating. And it's
Hmm.
about connecting on a human level. It's not about a business thing at that point. And
That's
it's
awesome.
cool. It is cool.
I
And
mean,
in fact, now that we're talking about it, during this podcast, I will share some photos of us having dinner outside in a cafe. And if anybody's ever been to parts of Asia, most of the time you eat what we call on the street. You eat on the cafe sidewalks, and everybody is just eating. It's like a family style dinners, and it's pretty cool. So I'll share some pictures and videos in this podcast. Well, I'll put them in there for people to see. It is a cool experience.
that's cool.
It is a cool experience.
Hmm. Any other? Are you going to go back there?
To Vietnam, if I do, it will be only for a just a lecture. I won't be training, having an office. I had an office in Ho Chi Minh for 3 years. I will not open up another office there, um, but I would go back and train. I'm kind of focused on a lot of the Middle East things right now. I have been to South Africa and trained. Um, the Middle East, of course, I think that's where the market is. I have been to Hong Kong and trained. Hong Kong is very nice. It's different than Vietnam, and the Philippines, and South Africa and South America. There's a lot of markets in there. I think at some point in time, um, you want to keep moving and keep growing. So Vietnam was a great chapter in my life, and I would go back and train, but I would not go back and open up an office.
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
Very cool.
it was cool. It was cool. Um, so that was an exciting part of my life at that time, and still training in the U.S. and juggling all those things,
Hmm.
and led me to